All right, folks. I think I am going to get started. Yeah. Thank you, Terry, for your help. Really appreciate it. Let me know if audio or something else breaks during the presentation. I'll do my best to catch up. I do have another computer in front of me if I need to switch. So this is it. Yeah, welcome to this session. Creative coding with P5 is what I'm here to talk about. My name is Saber Khan. My email is there. And the slides, I'll put this in the chat. You can put that into your browser and get to the slides on your own if you want. Yeah, let's get into it. So this presentation is going to have 4 parts. I'm going to talk about sort of CS for social good, the theme of the conference, and the challenges that are present. I think because of that, we need to rebuild CS better. And then I'm going to tell like a story of how we do it. I work for this organization called Processing Foundation. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about sort of implications for the classroom. And here's a little graphic. I have our flyer, this graphic hoodie on. And I'm very excited to talk about the organization. I'm very proud of the work we do and the impact we have. So this is a little bit more about me. I should tell you that I am an immigrant to this country. I'm from Bangladesh, a little big country in South Asia. And, I think a lot of learning about this country is part of, what my journey has been. As a professional, I've been teaching for a long time. I was a CS teacher until this past year. COVID sort of, in some ways, pushed me out of the classroom, and I'm a school admin for these couple of years now. This year, next year, we'll see what happens next. But when I was teaching it, I taught a bunch of courses, middle and high school. And then I also, as I said, mentioned that I do this role for Processing Foundation, which is an organization that I work for as their education community director. And I'm going to talk a lot more about it. And I also used to do this monthly Twitter chat. The hashtag's still active and somewhat, but I can talk more about that too, because it's about how to build a more sort of ethical computer science, something that I can talk a lot more about as well. But let's jump into what I really want to talk about, which is the topic of the conference, CS for social good. And I want to provoke you by like presenting this picture of all these men from these large tech companies. Well, a couple of women, Sheryl Sandberg and Ivanka Trump as well. But mostly white men and a couple of white women, and their meeting with Trump. And, pretty regular thing through the Trump administration, although they wouldn't actively advertise it aside from the first initial meetings. All of them, had regular meetings. So this is why I think, CS for social good is very hard. Tech is an area of incredible wealth creation, and power that tech has made it sort of insulated and protected and accountable. And that's why these meetings with Trump make sense. And that's why, deplatforming this very sort of destructive force in American life is so hard for them. So where do Black and brown students fit into this picture? Very hard to say. We can know from many of their Black and brown employees at their companies that they face discrimination, they get hired at a higher rate, there's very few opportunities to move up. So, it's not looking good. They can't even do it within their own shop. So let's talk a little bit about, how that sort of impacts computer science. This is Ivanka Trump with Hadi Pavorty and Brad Smith. And this is 2017. I believe they're in Detroit, Michigan, and talking about, how sort of CS for all will continue. And there'll be more grants under the Trump administration. So this perspective that these tech companies have bleeds into the computer science they fund. and and every intervention that tech has had in education has been pretty disastrous, from all the Bill and Melinda Gates money that was spent to ed reform schools, which is how I started in New York City, or Mark Zuckerberg's investment in the New York school district. Hundreds of millions of dollars just sort of vanished into thin air. So I think we can say that whatever politics they do have, they seem to have it, sort of behind the scenes with their money. It's often sort of disastrous and destructive, and maybe not very helpful. And to sort of find yourself having meetings with Trump and sort of bringing them on board with this plan, it seems very dangerous. Let's talk a little bit more close to home. Let's talk about New York, which is where I'm from. I'm talking today from New York City, Queens. I teach at a private school in Manhattan, which is where I'm doing sort of ed tech administrative stuff. But I'm also a big fan and somewhat of a participant in the CS for All movement, and as far as it sort of comes out of New York. And this is a report from them updating it. So they started a large, successful CS for All program, and it was a 10-year commitment, and sort of was a big part of the CS for All announcements that were happening across the country. But I want to take a closer look, and I know the slide's a little cramped there, so you might not be able to read everything. But on the second page there, there's a leadership message from the former chancellor, recently quit, Richard Carranza, and Fred Wilson, founder, as they call him here, New York City Foundation for Computer Science, which is part of what he is. He's also, they say down at the signature point, that he's a partner at USV, that's Union Square Venture. So he's a venture fund capitalist. He invests in companies, especially tech companies. And he gives, he's a rich white liberal, in this case, a very rich white liberal, and he gives money to civic projects. He is a big reason why computer science for all happened in New York. Through this organization, that logo is also on the first page, CSNYC there. So why does someone like Fred Wilson get to write an introductory message? Why does he get to have an impact on the district? Why did he even get to sort of pioneer this computer science for all program? New York City is not a poor district. It's a $34 billion budget. Close to 100,000 teachers. Why is Fred necessary? Why are people like Fred necessary? Why are people like Hadi necessary? Why are people like those people necessary for computer science? Because I think, as I'm trying to suggest, their impact is maybe, not so good. Well, I think charitably, the folks would say, hey, Fred has the money and the resources and access to make this, to get this going, to get computer science going. And that's a kind of a worrying answer to me, because I want to talk more about what Fred and people like him mean. Let's talk about their politics. So this is an event that happened in 2019. You may not remember this, but I'll try to do a quick summary. So in 2019, New York City or New York State made a secret deal with Amazon to give them a bunch of space to open a very large office in Long Island, Queens, very close to where I'm talking to you from. A bunch of folks, community organizations, politicians, residents spoke up and protested. There was bad press, and Amazon abandoned the project. And then there was a sort of second coalition formed to convince Amazon to change their mind. And this is this letter, and it's pioneered by Fred Wilson. He's a big reason why this letter got made. And in it, they write this open letter to Amazon. They talk about the public debate and consider it to be very rough and not welcoming. So a deal that was made in secret cannot be critiqued in public. It's it's sort of unnecessary to do that. And this is directly from Fred Wilson, the thing on the right. calling the elected leaders who opposed the deal, Ocasio-Cortez, my congresswoman, and Ginaris, a city council member, were the sort of, became sort of leaders of the political push against it, along with a bunch of community organizations and people from the community, I have to say. But, Fred sort of identifies them as reckless. They're failing their residents in some way, which is an odd thing to say because Amazon, as we know from, everything from recent reports in the New York Times to stuff that's been, coming out for, for a while now, is a horrible employer. So this is a great article last week in the New York Times. I urge you to read it. Jody Cantor and a bunch of other folks. So this covers how Amazon has done through COVID, and Amazon has done it remarkably well. So there's a reason why Jeff Bezos is richer than he's ever been. And they do have a big footprint in New York. They have a large distribution center in Long Island City called JFK 8. And if you look at it, maybe you can't see the graph, so I'll sort of break it out for you. Amongst their sort of warehouse helpers, laborers, it's about 30% African American, 20% Hispanic. But if you look at the rest of the company, it's significantly not that. So there's very little opportunity for any of those to move on, Black and Latino employees, especially in New York City. And this other graph, I think, is even more haunting, which is that, and I'm going to repeat this a couple of times, so make sure you hear me here. Amazon burns through 80% of their employees every year. So these are hourly warehouse workers. That's the majority, 80%. So it has to hire 80% every year, rehire them. And when they do that, when they open up in neighborhoods, when they open up in countries and cities and whatnot, they devastate the labor market. So this graph shows how once Amazon opens up, all hourly warehouse workers turnover rate increases. So the residents of Queens and Long Island City were trying to prevent exactly this. So what was Fred Wilson going on about? What was this opportunity that the residents of Queens and New York were giving up on? Did he not know about this? This was, maybe he hadn't seen this articles from last week, but this was clear to a lot of people in 2019 that this tech company is a danger to the livelihoods of Black and brown people in places like New York City. So that having a person like that have such a big involvement in computer science for all, I think is a danger. Is a danger, and that shouldn't be surprising. Tech, through its history, has been, because it's so powerful, a tool for oppression. It's very easy to do that. You have to work really hard to change that. And even the heroes that we have for tech come out of our stories of marginalization and despite their successes, and they come out of war. They come out of sort of attempting to bring destruction and violence to much larger parts of the world. So CS for social good is a very very hard thing to have. Almost everything is sort of set up to avoid that. So now that I've bummed you out, let's talk about sort of what do we do from here. So I think tech company dominated computer science claims to be apolitical, but I think, as I'm trying to show you, has politics, behind the scenes politics. It wants, public debate to be stopped. It wants to make deals in private, and it wants to have a big impact on commerce and politics in this country without anyone sort of thinking or talking about it. So that's going to fail the students in the classrooms that those tech companies fund. And I think it's dangerous to let them have this much influence in education. I think every time they've done it, it's been a disaster. Their founders have wasted huge sums of money and wasted a lot of people's time and energy. So I think I want to talk about sort of what do we do from here. So I'm going to lay out some goals here and then talk a little bit about my organization, because I think we do some of these things, and then talk about sort of what you can do with some of the things we make in your classroom. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So I'm going to go away from the political talk more to a more practical working and how to get this work done conversation. So these are some of the goals. I think we need to think about something that's grassroots, something that we can sort of participate in building. And I'm talking about all of it, including the code itself. Open source. So this is, this has a specific meaning in the world of software, which is that uh, that and then impacts a lot of big systems now, but that is a ideology and practice of building things as a community on places like GitHub, so everyone can contribute their time and energy. And because of that, very large projects like Linux are sort of open source. So I'm taking some inspiration from that here. And so how do we do open source computer science education? How do we sort of put ethics and justice at the center of it, so that as we're talking about power and how it works, they're actually thinking deeply about the way power can be dangerous. Also, as a place of belonging, and that belonging and identity formation can come by being creative, by making stuff that speaks to the student. And then finally, this is the hard question. How do you get money for this? Because that's not very clear, because once you sort of leave the tech company CS education, the dollars dry up. So I'm going to do a little history lesson now. So this is sort of transitioning into like how we might do those things, and telling a little story about my organization, Processing Foundation. So I'm rewriting all the way back to 1996. Interesting year. This little project started, which is a group of folks at MIT Media Lab, a very cool institution where a lot of great projects have come from, including Scratch, which I'm going to talk more about. But this is in a different group, the Aesthetics and Computation group, which used to be run by John Medea, a very interesting person, worth looking up. And they had a lot of artists in the group, and the artists wanted to, a couple of them, K-Series and Ben Fry, wanted to not just use software, but actually kind of make software to make their art. So asking sort of like a foundational question, which I think is going to be helpful for us. 1996 also the year that I came to this country and immigrated to this country. Next up in the sequence is in 2001, they actually put out some software. It was called Processing, and it was environment, a Java library. So it works on top of Java, and it has a little code editor, and you can write your sketches, which is what the programs are called, in a sketchbook model, and you can create graphics. And you're using all the foundational ideas of computer science to do so. So it became popular with artists, professional artists. It also became popular to learn how to code in some non-CS spaces like art schools and design schools. So this is the story I'm starting to build here. Through that, some really great things are happening. A lot of offshoot projects come out over the next 10 years, including Lauren McCarthy starts a JavaScript version, which is the one I'm going to show you more of today. And moving it to JavaScript to the web is very exciting for accessibility, because the browser is everywhere now, or a lot of places, and a lot of folks have good access to modern browsers. And she also made inclusion and access essential, because as a woman of color in the field, and Lauren herself is an artist and professor at UCLA Digital Media Arts. So as a woman of color in this sort of tech space, this art tech space, she wanted to sort of place inclusion and access right at the center of it. And I'll talk more about sort of what that means. Other things sort of happen in the community. The other members of our organization is, I always love seeing this picture of Dan Schiffman. Dan Schiffman, he's a professor at NYU ITP, which is similar to Media Lab or UCLA's Digital Media Arts, where Lauren teaches. He also runs a very popular coding channel called Coding Train, and it uses processing in P5 in its lessons. And here's one of the sort of playlists that he's made for teaching the basics, and it's very popular. He has hundreds of thousands of views. So talking about sort of building things differently, this is my sort of showing you some of the different approaches that can be taken, sort of non-formal CS education, that I think is exciting, that we have pioneered. And they also formed a foundation. This is our front page here. I urge you to check it out. I'll put the link at the end of it. It's also in the slides at the end. It has all our bios and all that. I think they're worth looking up. So a group of artists, coders form a nonprofit to support their software projects and sort of bring their vision of better tech education, computer science education to the world. And this is the mission statement, and I think I'll read it to you. The Processing Foundation is specifically interested in expanding communities of technology and the arts to include and support those who have not had equal access because of their race, gender, class, sexuality, and or disability. And that's sort of been our mission for the next last few years. We've been able to do some great partnerships because of NYU ITP, Dan Schiffman, Lauren's work, Computer Science for All, the program I talked about that Fred Wilson, helped get going. We've been able to partner with them in this course that they offer to 9th to 10th graders. Introduction to Computational Media uses P5 and processing to teach. So, for a little smaller organization, that's quite a bit of impact, which is very exciting for us. Through the foundation, we've been able to support the work of teachers. This is through our partnership with the New York City Department of Education. Emily Fields, a teacher who got a summer fellowship to use processing, the Java library, to do, here what they're doing is they're using projection mapping of sorts to have interactive dance things. So the movement of the dancer impacts sort of what's being projected back on screen. So this is kind of some of the, this is like a fancier application of what you can do with some of the software, really sort of take creative approaches to things. Leila Quinones, another teacher with the New York City Department of Ed, she worked on curriculum for building sort of beatboxes and basically music versions of projects so that our students can make music using the software so that she could sort of approach them in a more approachable way. We've also supported Erin Davies. They have a YouTube channel, Cozy Coding, where kind of inspired by Dan Schiffman, they bring like a very fun, chill approach to coding. Michael O'Connell's after-school teacher in Indiana, and looking at what do you do after Scratch, and can P5 be the answer? And we'll talk a little bit more about sort of where it fits into the curriculum in a second. And talking about open source. So this is, stuff from Lauren, there she is, Evelyn, who's one of the new leads for P5, bunch of the contributors. So, working open source, working in a new way means really sort of engaging with your volunteers who are building this library. These libraries are created by people giving their time and energy to contribute software because they believe in it and want to help out. So it requires a lot of time to have that, resources to be able to volunteer, and then it requires effort to bring your community together to hear from them and sort of make decisions in this case, which is that really focusing on access and sort of making that the number one goal of the library is what is necessary. The library had its 1.0 release last year, which is very exciting. So it's a full JavaScript library, which runs in your browser. I'll show you way more about it. It does a bunch of fun things, including letting you make animations, videos. You can work with 3D, you can work with AI. It's both very open and accessible, but also very high ceiling. We actually have a web editor, which turned 5 this year. And we have, I think by now, this is from last year, I think we're now by maybe a couple of million sketches, and lots of folks are using it in New York, in the States, India, lots of Brazil, lots of different parts of the world. So while we're very small, the projects we've made, especially the ones that are available via the internet, are very popular. And just to sort of highlight the open sourceness of it all, here's the GitHub page for the web editor, which I'll show you in a second. And it's an open project. People are trying to fix things, that bugs are getting reported. People are telling you what features are needed. All that is happening, and mostly through volunteers giving their time and energy. We also get support from programs like Google Summer of Code, which takes CS students and gives them, pays them over the summer to help open source projects. So we get a lot of contributions from there as well. And that's a good opportunity for us to grow our community, mentor more folks, and in a lot of ways have a contact with a much more international community than we normally do. And our community is pretty international. Before COVID, our community was hosting events all over the world, and you kind of see sort of the breadth of where folks are that use processing P5 and some of our other projects. And I was brought on about 3 years ago to kind of help us think more about the education space. So what we do is we highlight, profile different educators. This is Sharon Dela Cruz, one of our community members, and then we sort of offer the work that they've been doing already. So trying to sort of, be a different sort of gatekeeper and really highlight people. We also put on coding events, free and accessible coding events. In person, we've been doing them in New York, San Francisco, and LA. We've done a couple of virtually. We'd love to bring it to your community. If that's of interest to you, I'll have you talk more. And then finally, I think before we jump into some coding is I want to talk about sort of how I really ended up on it. This was the P5 mission statement. And this is really what I saw before I kind of really got into the rest of it. I was transitioning from being a math and science teacher in 2012, 2013, and I think P5 came out in 2013. And I remember reading this page and being like, oh, I'm really excited for what happens if you put this right up front in what you're doing. And that got me involved in the community. And then, down the line, I became a staff member there. So I'm going to pause here for a quick second. If you want to ask a question, excuse me, you can do that. I'm going to take a quick drink of water, but then we're going to do some coding, and I hope you want to do some coding. You can just watch me do some coding if you want, but we'll do that in 1 minute, okay? Yeah, maybe, how about this? Maybe take a quick second, and maybe we should do a quick chat thing. Tell me where you're physically located right now. So I'm going to do it, or your name and where you're located. Well, I guess you don't need your name because I can see that. So maybe just where you're from. Yeah, I'm in Queens. I'm going to throw that in the chat, and then we'll get coding. Atlanta, awesome. Big fan. New Hampshire, awesome. I haven't been in Lancaster, but I've been to Brattleboro, New Hampshire. And anywhere else in New Hampshire? I have a really good friend from somewhere up north in New Hampshire. More ATL. Yeah, this is awesome. I should have said this at the beginning. I'm really excited to be at this conference. Really, exhausted after this really tough school year, but this is a great conference. A lot of great people presenting, and I was excited to be part of it. So I'm going to, please put where you are in the chat because we might need it if you run into troubleshooting. But we're going to open this website and we're going to do a little coding. So I hope you're down for that. If you want to just sort of watch me do it, then that's cool too. So I'm going to kind of show you what's happening here. All right. So when you go to the link, it opens up the editor, and this is the editor, and you can start coding already. You don't have to do anything. But if you want to save your work, you want to sign up for it, and you can use, if you have a Google account, you can use Google authentication or GitHub authentication. So you don't even have to like make an account here. You can use one of these two buttons. If you have an account, you can log in. I am not going to log in just because I want to show you what you'd experience. Oh, the link. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat too. I should have done that. There you go. Yeah, I'll give you another minute to get there since I started a little quickly. And you're going to code something, and it'll be cool. I'm excited about what's about to happen. Okay, so back to what I'm showing. Let me know if you need me to slow down or go over something else. Please use the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. So I just talked about, sign up. You want to save your work. You don't need to today. So I would say like do that later. And then once you do, you can log in here. Uh, talked about our commitment to access and sort of our hopefully more international perspective. You can run it in Hindi, Chinese, and then these other languages that are also listed. And local translation and internationalization is a constant goal of ours. Speaking of that, if you press on the gear, these are some of the other sort of options you have. You can change the theme, light mode, dark mode, high contrast mode. So if you're in the classroom and the projection is, not too great, you can sort of switch to dark mode and maybe that'll make things easier. Auto save, auto close, word wrapping. These are sort of like to save your project. This is something JavaScript needs, which is, if you don't put your brackets and quotes, it gets upset. And then word wrapping, like what do you want to do when it hits the edge of the editor? And then we have accessibility features, including e-readers. So folks with low visibility or blindness, it'll describe as best as our library can what's happening on screen. So you might say, wow, art coding thing that has that. Yeah, a lot of folks are building, parts of the library where it'll describe if the circle, is moving back and forth, in which direction, all that kind of stuff. So we are committed to building those features and want to talk to more folks who have thoughts about what that means. Just a couple more things and I'll get coding. Here's the coding space. So this stuff on the left is the coding space. It comes with some, pre-code that's already in there right when you start. And we're running JavaScript. So if that's new to you, JavaScript works with HTML and is how sort of browsers work. JavaScript is basically a scripting language that will do stuff in your browser. So in here, we can write JavaScript and it displays on this canvas right here. But you still have access to the HTML file and the CSS file if you want to do more with what's happening, but we'll just play with JavaScript. All right. One more thing, and then we're going to code. What's up with this code here? These are two p5 functions. So p5 is a library, so it's a JavaScript library. So basically, folks wrote a bunch of new functions that make JavaScript easier to use. And if I press play, I can see what the functions do. And you might want to make a guess, but since it might be hard for you to type it out, I'll guess for you. This is a setup function. It runs once right at the beginning of the sketch. And in this one, it's making a canvas 400 by 400. So in computer science, 0, 0 is at the top left. So we're going 400 pixels to the right, 400 pixels down. We got this like canvas area to work with. And then draw is a loop that keeps running over and over again, and it makes a background. And the number here is how much gray or white to give it. So I can do 0. And if I do auto refresh, you'll see that it goes black. And if I do 100, oops. There you go. See all the changes. And if I do 75, it goes there. If I go back to 0, it's all black. So 0 is black, and then 255 is white, which is, if you've played around with RGB, that number should sound familiar. That's sort of the range of colors that we have. So we have that. Great. We got this white background. Let's make a quick little shape. So here we go. We're about to code. So if you're coding along, which I hope you are, let's write something, okay? And I'm going to, for anyone that joined late, this is the link to do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to make an ellipse, okay? And I'm going to give it, some arguments in these parentheses here, okay? I need to give it X and Y location, and I need to give it a height and a width, okay? So anyone want to take a guess about how I might do that? Well, you're going to say, well, how do I know? I don't know anything about p5js. How do you expect me to have an idea? Well, reference, we're proud of our reference. We can look up ellipse here. So I'm going to do search and look up ellipse. Okay, here's the page for ellipse. 4 numbers. And let's see, I'm going to need X, Y, and then width. Okay, so let's try it out. I'm going to go back to my editor, and I'm going to put it right in the middle of the space here. So I'm going to say 200, comma 200, and I'm going to want it 100 pixels wide, 60 pixels wide. There we go. I got my little oval there, right? Great. So made my first bit of code, and what's maybe new about this is we're kind of doing something somewhat sophisticated, but in a very quick and easy way. So that's the approach that's being pioneered here. Normally, to make a circle with JavaScript, regular vanilla JavaScript, it would be a lot more code. These are functions that simplify it and like a lot more possible. So now that it's actually now that the circle's there, it doesn't just have to be at 200. So if you remember, this is a loop, draw as a loop. I could say, hey, let's go wherever the mouse goes. And I have 2 variables, built-in variables, mouse X with a capital X. Let's leave that at 200. Okay, so let's do that.
Can you zoom in just a little bit?
Oh yeah, totally, good point. And I can also make this bigger. How's that? Better. And then I'll do this. Cool, thank you for that, Terry.
No, thank you.
So there we go, we're doing a little animation. I'll leave this up for a second, and then we'll talk about sort of what's happening and why it's happening. Also, I'm happy to copy and paste this into the chat too if you are coding. So I hope this is some JavaScript. We wrote some JavaScript, which is kind of fun because now that we can do this, a lot is possible because the world of JavaScript is very wide and it's all on the web. So everything that you make works in the browser and can work in the browser on their end. So for example, I could save my project. I could send it to another person just with a link. I can submit it on Google Classroom with the link. I can put it into a website. So all the fun JavaScript things are available. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening. And I'm going to sort of play the role of the teacher and the student here. So the question I might ask is like, how do I explain this movement? What's happening here? And the kids might say something like, well, the circle is moving with the mouse. Well, we want to get, sort of refine that language a little bit. It's moving on a particular axis, right? It's not moving on the y-axis, only moving on the x-axis. So that's what this variable is doing for me. If I wanted to follow the y-axis, you can imagine that there's another variable called mouse y, and now it'll move wherever I go, okay? We're gonna do one more thing, and then I think we're gonna go back to the slides and talk more about sort of what else you can do with it. So now I have it following my mouse X and my mouse Y. Great. I'm going to make it a little smaller and make it a little bit more manageable. So let's do 20 and 20. Okay, so there we go. We got a little mouse. We got a circle. The circle is following the mouse. And more specifically, this function is getting 2 variables. One is the mouse X and mouse Y. So it gets those coordinates, and it uses that to place the circle on there. Okay, let's do something fun now. We're going to get rid of this little background here, and I'm going to do something called commenting out, which is meaning putting 2 slashes in front of something. In JavaScript, that makes it a comment, so something that normally code writers would write to themselves, but it's a handy little trick for like not deleting code, but just sort of putting it aside for a second. So now if I do that, you notice something fun happens, right? I hope you're coding along because this part's really fun, just making these circles. And then, a good time to sort of talk to the kids about what's happening here. So what happened? Why is this happening here? So they might say something like, the circles are not disappearing, right? That's like the way of describing what they're seeing. And then we want to talk about sort of how is that possible via the code? Well, it's possible via the code because we took out this background function, which was in this loop, and it would basically cover up whatever ellipses got drawn. So the code executes top to bottom. It puts the background out, draws a ellipse, puts the background down, draws a ellipse, puts back. But now that we took the background on, it now just keeps drawing ellipses, and it doesn't get rid of the old ones. Great. Last thing we want to do is maybe do something with color. And color, if you go to the reference, is fill. So you're filling the thing with color. And we can give it RGB values. So I'm just going to make some up. I don't know if this is any good. Let's see. All right, that's not bad. It's a green color, right? So now I'm drawing with green. All right, one last little trick, and then we'll go back to the slides, is, while this is fun, we can kind of use some ideas to do something a little bit more like chaotic and unexpected. Why don't we take these variables and also use it in the fill, right? It's a number. It just wants a number. It doesn't really care what happens. Well, you might say what happens if the number gets too large. We could talk about that, but let's do this. And now we got this really fun little drawing program. And all it took was 2 lines of code, a little orientation, and now you're sort of ready to go. So go ahead and try this out. I'll put this in the chat. Here's the code that I ended up with. And this is kind of what P5 really pioneers as an able to do, is to offer folks a chance to make code, but use code to make art, make it very easy, but then build very sophisticated things on top of it. So I want to go back to the slides and sort of talk more about that. So in the slides, there are some other links that I have in there. There's like a how to get started with P5 handout that covers sort of how to orient yourself. So this is a worksheet you might use with that lesson that I sort of just rushed through. Colors, you can use color names, or these are the RGB numbers. That's a good reference for your students to have. So you kind of give them some of the very accessible tools that really a developer might use if they're building a website, and then the reference for P5 for more commands. And I've taught with it for 5 years. This is a poetry generator that was made with it. So a student made lists of different words, and then every time you press play, it shuffles to the thing and displays a different word. So you get this sort of like prompt generator. Other projects, a project that a student made here. Yeah, so you can also take the painting idea, which we started building just a second ago, and really build that out to like, hey, make a more sophisticated painting thing where you can change colors, shapes, eraser. So these are both projects I did with 9th graders. For a lot of them, it was an introductory computer science course, but because they're 9th graders, we got to do something a little bit more, maybe a little faster than what we do in middle school. So we got to, this project is kind of the end of the semester. It's kind of the middle of the semester. So they got to build pretty sophisticated stuff in their introductory CS course. And the question that we keep asking ourselves and our community is like, what else could we do with this? What more could we do with this? How do we use this to promote art and creativity and accessibility in our space, which is this computer science space, which is dominated by those players that I talked about at the beginning. They have the money, they have the resources, they are the big players. And while they may borrow the idea that, hey, let's make art, they can't really borrow the commitment to doing the thing that's going to help your students do whatever they want, versus sort of become some worker for Silicon Valley. So that's the question that we're asking. More nuts and bolts, how does it fit in? And then borrowed these from Angie. So the P5 fits in a lot of places, but I really like her slides and the way she presents it. She's going to be a processing teaching fellow. She teaches in San Mateo at this very nice school, fancy school, private school called Nueva School. She's the director of Innovation Labs. She teaches middle school computer science, a required course at that school. And then this is her bio. This is how she fits it in. We did this at CSTA last year, which is why I'm reusing the slides. Hope you don't mind. I thought this would be good to see. This is their K-12 required CS scope and sequence. So they make all their students take it, and this is how they scope out what to teach where. These are sort of the paradigms they're using. So it's unplugged as in paper, block space, and this is where they switch from blocks to text. tech space, and then the language that they're using: Scratch, JavaScript, and then Python, and then a little bit more about how it's all aligned. So like what kind of ideas are we covering? Yeah, and then sort of where the main like conceptual ideas. So, and I like the goal too. I think it's in a better, less like, hey, this is going to get you a job, and more like, hey, this is going to give you a creative toolkit. And for her, she's putting it right there. So 7th grade is when they're doing P5, which is, some place in the DOE in New York, they're doing it in 6th grade, 9th grade. You can do a wide range. You can also adapt it for APCS Principles A. It works really well, and submit great creative projects because it's so set up for that. And this is sort of what Angie says, and this is this also I wanted to include her slides, is this changing the tool and making this new tool, which is really built from the ground up and takes the user seriously and isn't sort of guided by something else. It's not trying to, get you a job in Silicon Valley or telling you that you're going to become a rock star coder. Really, it's just about, hey, like Scratch, let's make something fun. Let's make it a low floor so, you can get started pretty quickly. We want to sort of simplify jargon, and we want to kind of make things feel or the way you want to talk, the way kids want to talk and think, and not sort of like hide things behind jargon. I think the industry purposefully makes things difficult to understand, and it makes it an art class. And you can do lots of fun middle school, high school art projects that are on the kids' level, that are creative, animated, kind of like take all the great work they might be doing in Scratch and sort of make it much more sophisticated, interactive, because there's way more opportunity to make stuff doing that. So that is kind of it. Wow, okay, that was an abrupt end. I did not think that'd be the last slide, but here we are. Let's see, last things I want to share. So this little, our small little foundation, requires on support, and we also work with teachers a lot. So please visit our website if you're able to donate or want to participate in our programs. You can check it out there. P5js, one of our projects that I talked a lot about, they have their own website. You can check it out. Coding Train, that's Dan Schiffman, who's a big member of our community and puts out a ton of tutorials. He has books, all that kind of stuff. He's on YouTube, an amazing channel. Just I can't resist. It's so much fun, and I'm such a big fan of Dan. Yeah, so like big views, like 3 million views. He's like a big, on his own right. He's his own YouTube star, and all his tutorials are using processing in P5. So I do wanted to plug Ethical CS, even though we haven't really done too much. If you click on the link, you can see where the hashtag is. We do have some resources. If you know about that project, want to do more, let me know. Here's my email, here's my Twitter, and I'm doing, hopefully this is something might be interesting to some of you. This link, you can get a 20-minute meeting with me if you want to talk about anything in the slide deck. I'd love to talk with you. If you want to talk about how to use P5 in the classroom, I'd really, really love to talk about it, or processing, or something else that, with the foundation related. Or if you want to talk ethical CS, maybe you want to take the project over and send me click on that link and make a meeting with me. That's it for me. I'm going to stop talking and see if there's any questions, and really appreciate the opportunity to present to you all. Really like what's happening, and honored that I was asked. After this, I'm going to head up and go vote in the New York City mayor election. So you can also tell me who to vote for if you have feelings about it. Get started watching YouTube channel. Yeah, I think Dan's a really welcoming, fun place to start. Now let me put the specific playlist in the chat for you, just so that it's right here on the page that I'm on. But I'll put the link for it. This is it. It's he's a big draw because he's just a very fun, quirky, really thoughtful, kind personality, both in person and on YouTube. So he's a big draw for how folks get involved with P5. Yeah, like let's see this first video. this has, yeah, he's like 1.3 million subscribers. That's wild. Anyway, yeah, 400,000 views. So a lot of our community is this sort of like DIY learner and international community. And another one is teachers learning how to code, this is kind of how I got involved. I found Coding Train and I saw that he was using P5 and I went to P5. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I love their vision. I love how they're doing it. So yeah, Dan's a great gateway for getting into Coding Train and P5. And just genuinely a great person. So I hope you find him to be as awesome as I do. Cool. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to put the slides in the chat one more time. And then I think we are out of time.
Are there any more questions for Saber? Please post them in the chat. We have about a little less than 5 minutes. Thank you again for a wonderful presentation, Saber. That was awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we really believe art is the answer because I didn't stress this point too much, but really lets you, in a smart way, center the student and their creativity. So in the curriculum, which I didn't harp on too much either, it's all about making creative projects. So one is like make a meme, one is make an album cover, one is make a game. And there really are very sort of open projects that allow for kids to really make a lot of decisions about how it works. So we really think the answer is really changing what a CS class is, basically making it into an art class. Yeah.
Any other questions? Looks like we have a lot of folks that are familiar with using JavaScript. I'm curious to know, is there anyone that knew about P5 prior to coming into this session?
Yeah, let me know if you knew about it. We always feel like we struggle to get the word out. I mean, we do. Partially the problem is, not the problem, but it's really art and tech focused. So we're not, aside from me, not in really the K-12 space formally. I'm trying to do it, but really it's a very DIY, do-it-yourself approach, which in some ways I like. I like that, almost everyone that uses it, I get to talk to, or they, I get to like help them with it versus like giving, anonymous workshops like today.
Right.
So I do like the sort of person-to-person connection.
She said she thought the Coding Train was for that.
Yeah. I think he's modeling himself after what was the Reading Rainbow, but then it was the Coding Rainbow, but then he got a cease and desist letter.
I'm sure.
So he took it to Coding Train. So it's like the same vibe of Reading Rainbow, which is, those are the type of learning spaces I want to be in. It's fundamentally different than a prep CS courses, and I want to see it like take over high school education too.
When you say open source in high school, it's so hard because all the restrictions that IT puts on, at least in public schools. So So we have downloadable software too, and we're working on making the editor downloadable so you can just have it running. Because it doesn't need to access the internet for anything aside from unless you're saving your files. So we know that's a goal, and we're working on it at our own pace. Yeah, Autumn, your question, elementary. No, it goes. I mean, I would say you could probably get into it. Like, I think there's some fifth graders that maybe follow his stuff, but it really goes from there all the way through. He's doing like machine learning stuff, like very high end. Like, let's build our own neural net using P5. So, and like serious artists and professionals use P5 as a place to like prototype things really quickly. So, it's not just I think students feel this, like it's not just a classroom tool. It exists in the wild as a prototyping space for creative coders. Nice.
Cool. Great talking to you. I really appreciate it. I really want to get to the voting booth before it's too late and things get too busy, but I'll catch you all back at the rest of the conference later today.
Thank you so much. And just a reminder, recording of the session will be posted on our YouTube channel
I'll give you that link if you need it. Actually, I can email it to you, Saber. It's just Constellations. Cool. You just go to YouTube and type in Constellations, but I'll email you the link.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for your help, Terry.
Okay. You're very welcome. Take care, y'all. See you in the next session.